All right, good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Just let me know if I'm not loud enough. But welcome to the first Regional Commission meeting of 2022 on this beautiful day. Enjoy it while it lasts. We'd like to thank Mr. Deal, Mr. Egerton for suggesting this place and opening up to us for hosting us here today. And if you didn't get a tour before, do walk around after, and if some people are hanging around, there's a lot to see out here, and it's really terrific. We appreciate it. If everyone would stand, please. We have a flag over here for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yeah. I was going to say. Okay, Patrick, if you'd please call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Ashby, Mr. Butler, Mayor Catlin.
Yes.
Mayor Coiner.
Here.
Mr. Crozier, Mr. Curry.
Here.
Mr. Deal.
Here.
Ms. Donahue.
Here.
Mr. Egerton.
Here.
Mr. Hively.
Here.
Mr. Jackson. Mayor Lamar. Mr. McCullough.
Here.
Mayor Roby.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Mayor Sisson. Ms. Sutphin. Ms. Taylor.
Yeah.
Mr. Voorhees.
Here.
Mr. Weekly. Mr. Woods.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
All right. If everyone's looked at the agenda, are there any changes or additions to the agenda? If not, we need a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of adopting the agenda? Aye. Any? Okay. Are there any members of the public here that would like to address the group? Did you hear from anybody prior to?
Not prior to the
Okay.
meeting. No.
All right. Okay, we will move on to presentations and special recognition. We're very privileged to have Laura Loveday here, Special Projects and Grant Administrator for Culpeper County, and she's going to discuss the county's role here as well as future plans for the Carver campus. So Laura, thank you.
Thank you. I did write down my notes today, so please forgive me if I'm reading a few of them. Thank you so much for having me out here today and allowing me to give you an update on some of the momentum that is occurring at Carver, despite some of the outward appearances driving in that may suggest otherwise. I don't know how many of you might need a little bit of background about the Carver campus, but it was originally constructed in 1948 and was the George Washington Carver Regional High School, and it was the only high school for African American students in Culpeper, Madison, Orange, and Rappahannock counties up until 1968. The final interest of the region was purchased by Culpeper County in 2004, at which time we became the sole owner of the campus. Carver's history is not just Culpeper County's history. It is an important part of the story of our region, and we are committed to its revitalization. So, where are we at today? And a lot has gone into, and we can certainly touch back on this, what happened between 2004 and 2020, because there was a great deal of work that was led by the Regional Council as well as our Cooperative Extension Agency. But as this is just to be an update, I'm kind of starting at the 2020 time period and moving forward from there. Before 2020, we had tried unsuccessfully for a number of years to bring fiber to the Carver Center. We had a number of unsuccessful grant proposals, including a VATI grant application where we partnered with both Orange and Madison counties, as well as an unsuccessful rural reconnect application. But I'm proud to say that we were able to take advantage of the 2020 Governor's CARES Act Commonwealth Connect opportunity, which resulted in a dedicated fiber line being installed that was completed at the end of 2021. This was a critical step in moving forward with our plans to revitalize the Carver campus and house a number of complementary programs here in the very near future. I wish dark. When you pulled in, you might have noticed sort of a pad site adjacent to the parking lot to the left of the main entrance. Part of our grant-funded fiber line extension to Harbor included the creation of a public access Wi-Fi location. We are just about to install some signage reflecting the fact that Wi-Fi is now available for the public to use at the front of the building in our parking lot. But truth be told, that parking lot isn't a whole lot to look at this time. And so we were made aware of an opportunity to apply for a $25,000 grant from Giant Foods, which we are eligible for because of our Martin's grocery store chain, part of the Giant Food parent company. And we asked that we be allowed to construct an outdoor classroom on that existing 24 by 60 pad site that adjoins the front lawn space. We were awarded that grant and anticipated being able to build a modest pergola with the help of Friends of the Rappahannock, who are about to construct a native species greenhouse on site at the Harbor campus. But because sometimes my dreams exceed my budget, I sought out partnerships within the community to help me augment that $25,000 grant award and turn it into the classroom that you see depicted here. We have secured a number of donations to this project from the local community, with Greensward Landscaping taking the lead on the design and also sharing with us a number of industry contacts who were willing to contribute materials and labor to the project. So we hope to have the outdoor classroom complete by the end of this summer. Today would have been the perfect day to sit underneath of this green roofed pergola and enjoy our lunch with Wi-Fi. Next slide. I hope that many of you had the opportunity to walk around to the back of the building on the other side to the future community kitchen space that was awarded a $470,000 industrial revitalization fund grant this past November. I try to be very open about the fact that we received a lot of no's to many of our proposals before we started getting yeses. And our first IRF proposal was declined in 2020. So we took what we learned from that process and strengthened our appeal. We made sure to include local food trucks who would support an initiative such as this, and also could convey the importance of those businesses to our region in that they serve wineries, breweries, event venues, and other tourism-focused businesses in the region. And in our second application, 2021, we also had support from the Department of Health, who noted that food trucks lack access to commercial cup spaces and points of inspection. Creating a local hub for our producers to add value and potentially supply other food-based businesses proved to be the winning combination in our 2021 IRF application. And certainly I don't advocate for the sort of field of dreams, if you build it, they will come model. We had a number of other funders who had expressed interest in supporting this concept, but they had also made it very clear they didn't want to be the first feet in the door. So since that award announcement in November, the kitchen, standing alone, has also received a subsequent $100,000 private foundation grant that they'll be putting towards this project as well. Next slide. The IRF grant opportunity included a one-to-one grant match requirement that was easily met by the capital improvement plan projects already approved but not yet appropriated or spent by the Culpeper County Board of Supervisors. We have the funds necessary to replace the second-story windows in the front of the building, to renovate the right-hand wing of the building for the Cooperative Extension Agency offices. And luckily for us in this application, due to COVID, those projects were put on hold, those funds weren't expended, therefore they were available for us to use again as match in our second year application for those IRF funds. The IRF program seeks to revitalize lighted structures. And so for that reason, I haven't been in support of us touching anything until we knew that those funds were awarded. We have to remain lighted throughout that process and not shine things up too quickly or risk potentially not being seen as a successful candidate. So we will shortly go out to bid for a number of funded but not yet constructed projects here in the main building. And in the meantime, I am working with a technical illustrator and animator, actually from Oregon, on some pro bono renderings of the Carver campus to better illustrate to prospective funders what the revitalized campus will look like. Next slide. So this is actually rendering, not photograph. I hope to have some of those illustrations finished for this meeting, but they are very much still a work in progress. And I've asked the illustrator to include the restored name in the images in case you are not familiar or perhaps you missed it coming in. The blueprints on the first slide that we showed would have shown how the building was originally, which included the engraving of George Washington Carver Regional High School at the top of the front doors. But at some point after Culpeper County Schools were integrated in 1968, the engraving was replaced with Piedmont Vocational School. The community would like to see the original name restored to the front of the building, and so for this reason, it seems appropriate that our aspirational renderings reflect that goal. Next slide. You can see what the engraving looks like today. To that end, the Culpeper County Board of Supervisors recently supported the submission of a letter of intent to apply to the National Trust for Historic Preservation's African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund in order to restore the name. And we anticipate finding out in April if we have been selected to move on to the full grant application for that opportunity. So what's next? One thing that I'm sure several of you are familiar with is that Representative Spanberger's community funding initiative. I know for many of your localities, there were projects included in that program as well. Carver could stand to receive a $200,000 contribution to the replacement of the roof. And my understanding was that it was stuck at the Senate, and there was some small glimmer of hope that with the budget being passed in February, we still might have an opportunity to receive that funding. But if you've heard otherwise that it's dead as a doornail, that's also a very real possibility. So there are two additional opportunities that I'm interested in pursuing, but I've not yet brought these to the Culpeper County Board of Supervisors. So that's full disclosure. Because of that recently awarded $100,000 of foundational support to the kitchen, we think that the Carver Community Kitchen Project might stand a chance at receiving some additional Go Virginia funding. Shannon Holland, who many of you know, who's our Go Virginia Region 9 Director, saw a presentation that was made by the Carver Kitchen, I believe at the Regional Council meeting or at some point, and thought that the second phase of the Carver Food Enterprise Center, with its focus on local producers selling beyond farmers markets, and in fact manufacturing and distributing outside of state lines, could potentially be a successful Go Virginia opportunity. So we're hoping to take this concept to our board in the near future and potentially apply for $200,000 that would further equip the kitchen with the necessary equipment that they need in order to support our local producers growing their businesses and again looking to distribute outside of state lines. We have been given the green light to move this application forward once we have the blessing of the Culpeper County Board of Supervisors. because of the in-kind commitment that the town, however, has made to utilize some time from a new position in their tourism and economic development department that will focus on the growth of local businesses and the education necessary in order to take product from concept to distribution. It is very likely that many of you will also see an ask from me for a letter of support for the proposal in the very near future, because as we all know, Vote Virginia relies heavily on support of our regional partners. We believe that once the kitchen is constructed and the campus has been revitalized, there's no reason why the next Route 11 potato chip company or Halo ice cream couldn't be developed in our kitchen, scaled, distributed, and then manufactured in our region. Final slide. And this one truly is a swing for the fences kind of opportunity that I'm very interested in. There is a federal program through the USDA called RISE with $10 million available nationwide and individual awards up to $2 million. The program is in its second year of availability, and in year one, there were only 2 awards made nationwide, each just under $1 million. Conveniently, the application requires the partnership of a locality and a land-grant university to create a rural business incubator that can be focused on an industry of the region that they serve. In the case of Carver, I think it would be beneficial to write a proposal that completes the renovations of the main building. I would want to include the auditorium space on the first floor and the entire second floor to be part of the application. There's a very large classroom space upstairs that could become a marketing lab where product design experts and graphic designers could be brought in to work on the marketing materials that a small startup food or ag-based business might need in order to realize distribution and market share. The upstairs classrooms could serve as business incubator space for rent, and the auditorium could feature a full schedule of community education. And again, I've not yet asked our board about moving forward with either of these last 2 proposals, but I wanted to take the opportunity to make you aware of them as should I be granted the green light to move forward, I would anticipate at least an email from me asking for letters of support for Carver and these 2 projects. I have no idea if I stuck to 10 to 15 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Laura? Comments?
Who owned the building before the county bought it? That was so many years ago.
It was jointly owned by the 4 counties.
Okay.
What's the full estimated cost to do?
Second floor here, one here, 1 to 3.
So to, at the very end, with all the bells and whistles, I mean, everything, the equipment, 2.2 running. So it's like 1.3 to get it going. As we talked, I think in August, Gary and I talked to the group about doing it in phases. So the first phase gets all the infrastructure, and the commissary, and catering, those type of things, and then after that, it's all capacity. And I have reached out, I've been contacted by various people who are interested in the kitchen, who's starting a business, and they're from all our counties in this region, so it's just not Culpeper County. So, and I'm working on getting the final commitment letters to a couple of anchor tenants that will be ready to start when we're ready to open.
Awesome. Anyone else? Good. But
Just hitting people up for money.
Yes, the budget.
But it's wonderful. I mean, there's so many exciting things going on here. I'm so impressed with what I've seen, and I know that it's just going to be terrific. It's a real jewel to have in our region. So it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Phone number.
Absolutely. My
I'll
one
make
last piece of gossip to share is Carver was on the short list for President Biden's visit to Culpeper. And while we weren't ultimately selected, told him to please come back 12 to 18 months. It'll be looking a lot different.
I'll just comment that as far as the high school and how long they were, I think it finally closed in '68. But in '65, over 100 African Americans were going to Orange High School. I think the majority of the Orange County high school students were at Orange High School in '65. The final ones, it was phased. So 65 sounds a little better. 68.
Yeah.
It's almost 70. It's terrible. It was that long, but
But
it
it
was the
took
mid-60s.
Well, thank you again. Before I move on, Mr. Jackson is here. Welcome, the newest member of the commission from Madison County. Thank you for joining us. Okay, we'll move on then to minutes from the October 27th meeting are in your packet. We also have a couple sets of meetings from the executive committee for your information. But if you just pay attention to the October 27 minutes, if there's any changes or anything, we need a motion to, or we need a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. Now we get into the financial reports. Staff's prepared an amended budget for consideration along with the year-to-date report through January. So Patrick, if you would review the proposed amendments.
I will. So what's included in your packets and on the screen is the revenue and expenses through January 31st. Revenues are 53% and expenditures 47% of the proposed amended budget. We remain, operating expenses are very much in line or below budgeted amounts. As we've talked about in the past, some of our traditional operating expenses, travel and some other things are slowly beginning to get back to where they normally were prior to 2 years ago. But most of those remain, under budget at this point. Project expenses are continuing to track as we would expect. The amendments that are proposed today are, most of them are, either straight additions of revenues that have corresponding expenses. That includes an additional $47,500 from the PATH Foundation in support of the mobility management, the regional transportation collaborative work that we've been doing. Another one is the addition of $5,338 in Rural Transportation Assistance Program, again for the Regional Transportation Collaborative. This was for reimbursable training expenses for partners within the RTC, and $19,000 in pass-through revenue from Northern Piedmont Community Foundation that was related to the Town of Washington Post Office Enhancement Fund. We do propose to reduce revenues on the NIFLIF Chesapeake Bay grant from $200,000 to $125,000. That's just for this fiscal year. The funds will still come through. It's just that based on spending to date and activity on that grant, I don't anticipate seeing all of that funding come in this fiscal year. So that would also have a corresponding reduction, same amount from in expenses from 185 to 110 as part of this fiscal year. As we did last year, we were fully funded on our rideshare program grant through Department of Rail and Public Transportation, but they have, the first 6 months of this fiscal year, they were not encouraging spending on advertising or anything else related to carpools or van pools or ride sharing. So we're proposing a reduction of $20,000 in the revenues on that grant. What I will say is that organization, since turn of the year or a little bit after January 1st, has begun to change its tune in terms of spending and is encouraging advertising and some of the things that have been on hold. So we are expecting to see those expenses begin to get back more closer to normal as in past years, but it will be a reduction in this fiscal year. That actually, because that's an 80-20 grant program, the corresponding expense actually saves us about $3,000 compared, because it would be matching funds that we would be applying to those advertising funds. And then the last item is just the addition of $4,500 for redistricting assistance that we've worked on with Culpeper County, Rappahannock County, and the town of Warrenton. There are some expenses related to software and travel and staff time that are direct to those that are also added in, $3,750 for that. And then the last thing I would mention is at the executive committee meeting on February 4th, we did note on the budget sheets, there's an unallocated revenue of $49,300 and a couple dollars that has been there since the budget was adopted and remains there with these proposed amendments. There was a request from the executive committee for sort of an idea of where those funds come from. Why do we have a larger amount than normal in terms of unallocated revenues? And so I'm just going to share a couple of notes I made just for your information on where the sources of those funds are. What I would say is, the first thing I would say is these are discretionary funds, so they're available for use as the commission determines and at the commission's direction. They're not really tied to individual grants that we have, but are more related to, and they're not specifically tied to General Assembly allocations or your local per capita dues. Those latter sources, the General Assembly allocations and the per capita dues, are always our most flexible, and so are traditionally been thought of as our discretionary funds. And that's typically what we use for match requirements for grants that we have from state and federal grants, or also just for commission operating expenses. Historically, those uses, the match requirements and the operating expenses, use up about 90% of the local per capita dues, and then the other 10% I think we try to make up for to you all with service directly to your localities if we're working on projects or just with other technical assistance. In past years, these unallocated revenues have been minimal, usually less than $10,000, and are directly budgeted as contribution to reserve. The couple of things I want to highlight are that traditionally, and up until probably 4 or 5 years ago, most of our grant programs were reimbursable grants. So we would spend staff time and seek reimbursement directly to the state or federal granting agency. And so it was 1 for 1. We would spend the staff time and then the money would come back in to reimburse that. We've seen in the PATH funding, the No Kid Hungry funding for the Farm to School Liaison position, but also with our Department of Environmental Quality, our Chesapeake Bay Watershed grant. Those are turned more towards pay for performance. So we're getting paid a certain amount of money, but we are not required to turn in, our timesheets for those. And so in some cases, that's allowed us to move staff time that previously was billed to discretionary funding for things that we didn't have a direct billable grant into those areas. So I think that's one main area where some of those funds where we're getting the money and we're not having to show, okay, we spent this X amount of time on those grants. I would say we come pretty close to spending the amount of money that we get, but in some cases we're not having to do that. I would also say that that's the example there, especially with the DEQ grant, is where traditionally we've used up some of our discretionary funds because it's been a priority of the commission in the past to have environmental planning, natural resources and agricultural involvement, things of that nature that sometimes have not had a direct funding source. We've done a good job of cobbling together grants to pay for that position and to have that position in place, but this DEQ grant has really allowed us to have something that more directly ties to what we're doing and not have to use our discretionary funds. So I wanted to make those notes for your awareness as to those unallocated revenues, and also just to remind you that it is up to the commission to, that you can use those for, you can put them into reserve. We have a mortgage on our office building that could be paid down, or you can, choose to do other things with it if there's a regional study or something along those lines in the future that we might want to hold on to. But that's where they stand as of today. That's sort of why there's a larger amount this year than there has been in past years. I'm happy to answer any questions on that or any of the budget amendments as well.
Anyone have any thoughts?
Reasonable to say it's not a recurring revenue source. No
Right.
expectation going forward, given the grants that we're involved in right now.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think, we've traditionally, tried to operate, and I've traditionally tried to present a budget that, at minimum is balanced, at more so sometimes has extra. I did share with the executive committee that amount of money right there is not enough to fund a full-time position. So we're sort of in this in-between area between, okay, we could devote it to more capacity, which we certainly have, I think, could use, but at the same time, it's not necessarily something that would count on annually, year over year.
It seems like a lot to put in reserves too, so it makes sense to do something with that. Any thoughts about how we can best
Would it make
allocate?
sense for the executive committee to either Patrick, come up with maybe a short list of things that make sense. You mentioned mortgage, I don't know what our rates are, and bring out some options. I don't sense that this is a time-sensitive issue, so the executive committee could dig into it and inform the rest of us.
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit, and we could get more specific, I guess.
Or you
about-
just send it to Rappahannock County.
Very nice.
Well, it could, I would say it could be something that we tie in as part of the FY23 budget discussions, and if the executive committee wants to make a recommendation for that, how they would choose to move forward, I think that's fair.
Sounds like a plan. Anyone else? Questions, comments? I guess we need to adopt this amended budget if there's a motion.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion about that? Okay, all those in favor of adoption of the budget, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. We also have the biannual financial account summaries. You have some comments on?
Just brief, these are presented to you in August and February just for your information to keep track of where accounts are. Again, over the past year, we've had lower than expected operating expenses, which I think has seen most of our revenues in terms of operating accounts and our reserve accounts stay pretty solid or have some additions. I would note our reserve accounts, both we have through the Virginia Investment Pool, we have in the long-term bond fund, but also the more liquid fund. The returns on the long-term bond fund have, as many of you probably know, have plummeted. So we've seen negative returns actually over the last several months. So we'll look at that as between myself and Terry probably and determine if we want to go in even for the small amount that the liquidity fund provides in terms of interest compared to the long-term bond fund account. It shouldn't be too hard to move between those two. But overall, we're in a good position. You can see, again, year over year, the checking account, the money market, which kind of fluctuates based on funding that comes in, particularly right after the turn of the fiscal year, but also with the again, the funding that I talked about from the PATH Foundation for the Regional Transportation Collaborative comes as a lump sum in September, and so that puts us up, and we tend to draw down on those funds that come at the beginning of the year throughout the year for our regular expenses. And then just over the last 10 years, we continue to see a positive trend from where we were in 2015 or so. And again, I think this speaks to the question of what we just talked about of having a plan for either unallocated revenues or reserve funds and where we want to start targeting those. Again, I think there's opportunity for things that benefit the entire region in terms of whether there's a study or whether it's just providing the match for some plans that maybe we've not been able to move forward with as we kind of move forward. But it's again a good position for the commission to be in at this point.
Terrific. Anyone have any questions on that? Yeah, it is a terrific position to be in. Thank you. Can you move on then to your director's report?
Yes. Just a couple of things on administration. Again, thank you to Culpeper County for hosting and for all the partners at the Carver Center for the tours. I know the museum was of interest, and we probably could have spent more time there. Also, the New Pathways Center, and I appreciate Sue Hansen, who's a former regional commissioner, opening that up for all of us and providing those tours. I want to thank the commission staff. I specifically said this would be a good one for them to come out to. We've got, just because of the tours, but also it's the first meeting of the year, so most of our staff is here today. Certainly appreciate them being here and providing their support, and also just want to welcome Brittany Amador, who's joined as a social work intern for the first part of this year. She's at Mary Baldwin University. This is the second year in a row we've had an intern from Mary Baldwin through their social work program. It's really become a good pipeline in terms of our work with Foothills Housing Network, so certainly welcome Brittany. Staying on with Foothills Housing Network, Rebecca Wareham and other staff were involved with the point in time count, which was at the end of January. That's the point in time count for the homeless population, not only those that are currently in shelter, but also those unsheltered. Many of your localities, whether through Department of Social Services or nonprofits that are operating in your locality, also participated and were very supportive. speaking as, when we were in a bit of a transition with Foothills Housing Network 2 years ago, and having to step in and sort of coordinate some of those, I know it is a very difficult job, and so I certainly appreciate the work that Rebecca did and pulling together everybody to participate in that, and we'll have more on that, a more detailed report probably in April for you. Did want to note that Michelle Edwards, who's our environmental programs manager, she has been named vice chair for the Chesapeake Bay Local Leadership Work Group for 2022. Also, probably in April, she will be presenting from the modules that were developed by the Local Leadership Work Group for a local government guide to Chesapeake Bay. One of our deliverables this year for our DEQ grant is to engage with elected officials on some of those modules, and so I think that would be our first opportunity in April would be with the commission, but certainly would be willing to come out to any of your counties and towns to do that. And I also just want to put it on anyone's radar, especially elected officials, is that the Local Government Advisory Committee for Chesapeake Bay, the work group, Local Leadership Work Group, is likely going to have another round of watershed tours, which I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Michelle, if that sounds right, when they had the first one. If Mr. Crozier was here today, I'd probably put him on the spot and ask him to say what a beneficial process it was for him, but it's sort of a 2-day, you get on a bus with other elected officials from the watershed, and they kind of take you to projects and kind of just do a very deep dive in terms of educating about the benefits downstream from those of us here in the upper watershed. So we'll pass along more information as that comes around. Liz Beeling is here today. She's our farm to school liaison. If you remember from the October meeting, she presented on her initial activities. I want to say she's continued to do that, but also that as we've thought about the end of the school year, I mean, most of her work has been within schools, and as I've said in past meetings, she's been basically within almost every school, it feels like, or elementary school at least in the region, probably in the first 5 months here. But we've started to look at summer when school is out of session, so we're starting to look at partnerships with farmers markets to have her be at some of the farmers markets in the region. So if you have any of those that you want to connect us with, we would certainly be willing to see how that would work in terms of continuing some of the tastings and Harvest of the Month education that she's done. We're finishing up, actually we just finished, yesterday was our final meeting on the Culpeper Small Area Plan, which was focused on long-term transportation needs. This was sort of in the east of the town of Culpeper, in between the town boundary and Route 1529, and then Route 1529 Business. We will have a report, which I'll share certainly with the Culpeper members, but everyone, just so you get a sense of what that study looks like. That was through the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investments Technical Assistance Program, and we will have 2 more of those that we're directly involved in beginning in the next month or so. One is with the town of Remington, looking at connectivity through the town for multimodal connectivity and a couple other things, and another one with Rappahannock County. My understanding is the town of Washington also is going to be kicking off one of those projects too, so we'll kind of keep involved with those over the rest of this calendar year, but it was a good program for the first year, and I'm glad that we've got some more of those technical assistance opportunities coming into the region. You'll see one of the bullet points on the agenda is for Smart Scale, so I just want to make sure that if your jurisdiction would like the commission to serve as an applicant for Smart Scale applications, the pre-application deadline is April 1st, so myself and Matthew Decatur have had a lot of conversations with local staff, but certainly want to make sure that if there are projects and if you feel like you're going to exceed the 4 that you're allowed to submit, talk to us so that we can make sure that we use all of our 4 project opportunities as well for Smart Scale. Certainly there's a lot of ongoing discussion with VDOT about potential projects there as well. And then just the local technical assistance, just a couple of things. One is we've worked with the town of Gordonsville for an application to the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Michelle and Matthew have primarily provided that assistance in terms of the grant writing kind of review and also some mapping for that related to the town's desire to rehabilitate its pool, but also build up parkland that is directly adjacent to the pool that's in town. As I mentioned, we've completed our redistricting process with Culpeper and Rappahannock County, unless there's something that changes at the last minute, and also we're wrapping up with the town of Warrenton. It's always an enjoyable process, and one that's sort of a one-off type project that I just find to be very, very interesting always, just kind of playing with where the district boundaries can move. Yeah, I think that would be it, other than, again, if there are meetings or if there's initiatives going on locally, please let me know or let other staff members know, because we like to be involved, and I think sometimes we can definitely bring a different perspective to, even if it's a very localized initiative or project that's ongoing. So happy to answer questions.
Anyone have anything for Patrick? Like to report?
Patrick, I should mention also D'Angela Alexander, starting with coordinated entry.
Right.
And that might have been something that you mentioned at the last.
At December, but yeah, thank you. D'Angela's here today. So yeah, D'Angela joined us just before the December meeting as our coordinated entry specialist, and there's a lot of changes to that program, some of which you'll probably hear about in April. So.
Anyone else have anything? Okay. Well, then we'll go on to the staff updates. First, staff will provide an update on the PDC Housing Development Grant and recommendation for initial awards for the Commission's consideration. This is exciting.
Okay, I'm going to run through these kind of our slides here, and again, want to thank Jennifer Little, who has been our primary staff person in supporting this program as we've developed this, the Housing Development Program. If you remember, last June actually, we were at a meeting at the Town Hall in Warrenton. Had a speaker from Virginia Housing talking about the funding that they had available for the PDC Housing Development Program. The reminder that the funding that they awarded to us was $2 million, and that's based on population. So all of the planning districts across Virginia were awarded these funds based on population. Their Virginia Housing's guidance and their requirements for us were for each million that you were awarded based on population, they wanted to see 10 new units per million. So we participated and said 20 new units would be the minimum we would look to support with that funding. The grant period runs from last July when we signed off on the contract, and the goal for Virginia Housing is to have the units constructed by June of 2024. There is a caveat of an extra year if you've got through the pre-development phases and just need additional time for construction, but we're sort of trying to stick with that 2024 deadline as much as possible. Staff provided copies and reviewed documents that we had developed with the Commission in August, October, and December. This dealt with regional strategies, some of the initial proof of concept applications that we were seeking. And then in December, we announced and shared with you that we had received 9 proofs of concepts, which are sort of pre-applications for $6.2 million in requests. So we had conservatively budgeted $1.8 million available with additional held back for our staff time, but also for any legal or other issues that we would run into, just to have there as a 10% placeholder. After that December meeting, we sort of went back and said, okay, if this is actually going to go forward, we probably want to set a ceiling for requests at $500,000 per project or $50,000 per unit if it was a smaller project that didn't have wasn't going to meet that $500,000 ceiling. So subsequent to those initial proofs of concept, we did communicate back to those applicants with those revisions in terms of the ceiling for funding requests. And in January, we received 7 applications requesting $2.9 million. So those applications have an approximate total of 164 units included. 4 of the 5 counties, projects were located within 4 of the 5 counties, and all the projects were multi-unit projects ranging from 4 to 60 units that were received. So since we received those complete applications, staff and primarily Jennifer has conducted site visits and had a series of follow-up questions with each of the applicants. We've sought, in instances where it wasn't provided, proof of site control documentation, as that's something that we've sort of identified as a key component to feeling like we have some guarantee that the project will be able to complete on the time frame that Virginia Housing has put in front of us. We've also informed applicants that even if they requested up to the ceiling of $500,000 or $50,000 per unit, that may or may not be able to be met given our funding constraints and the amount of funding that we have. 5 of the 7 projects propose majority 2-bedroom units. Several of them have some mix of units in terms of 1 or 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, but 2-bedroom seems to be the sweet spot for a lot of the projects. And then most of the projects target, at that 60% AMI or 80% AMI or below One is at the 50% AMI or below. The other requirement from Virginia Housing is all of the projects do need to be 80% or below. So just a high-level review of what we saw. There's some ideal attributes that were included. You know, one single project here that's at a house scale, but would have multiple units within the single unit itself. It blends into the neighborhood where it's found. There's 4+ units designed within the structure, so we're sort of at this point on that project. It's definitely 5 units with the potential for a 6th unit to be included. Infill within towns is something that we see on just about, not quite every project, but the majority of the projects, where there is some either taking existing buildings and doing some demolition and rebuilding a new structure, or filling in with a parcel that is not yet developed, but is within a town and close to services. Other projects are adjacent to parkland, which in terms of amenities and tying into walkability and other things certainly is a benefit to what we see as the projects that were submitted. We've got an idea of a small house micro-unit type development that potentially would be closely tied to services, although not within a town or you know, a dense area. Adaptive reuse of a commercial building, what used to be a restaurant. Proposal to turn that into multi-unit apartments. And then an owner-occupied. One of the projects is owner-occupied as proposed, rather than the other 6, which are rental proposals. So we as staff, our process, we sort of grouped these into a couple different scenarios. One, we looked at geography. So we certainly, our feeling and what we had proposed to you previously as part of some of our documents was wanting to make sure that we look at this from an equitable standpoint geographically. So not wanting to just select projects in one specific locality, but trying to support throughout the region, as long as the context met the specific location. Then we also looked at similar size projects, and it sort of broke down into 3 different categories. The first is a very small size project, so we've got 2 of those, one from Foothills Housing Corporation, which is the adaptive reuse of, if you're familiar with the Ben and Mary's Steakhouse on 17 north of Warrenton, they would be taking that building and renovating it and turning it into 4 units of rental units. Skyline Cap in Madison, that was the building that would be the single kind of house structure that would have 5 to 6 total units. That building used to be a transitional housing unit operated by Madison Emergency Services Association. It's been not been fulfilling that role for several months, if not up to a year. Skyline Cap has proposed to purchase that building and turn those into affordable rental units, which we've kind of gone back and forth with Virginia Housing just in terms of confirming that that's an eligible use, and they have said yes, it absolutely is. They did have some concerns with buying affordable housing units that were on the market and keeping them affordable. They said they didn't really want the money to go towards that, and so I know some other regions have dealt with that issue, but that was one where this project certainly fits, and they feel good about it, as do we. The kind of mid-sized projects, these are 16 to 24 units. 24 units is proposed by Heroes Bridge, which is a nonprofit primarily operating in Fauquier County and towards Northern Virginia. They propose 24 units. They've got a 30-year land lease proposed. They don't have site control at this point in time, but they would be targeting they work with veterans, and so it would be something that would be adjacent to the new Veterans Care Facility in Fauquier County. Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services has a project in the town of Orange, where they would propose to demolish what used to be the Sheltering Arms shelter, which I don't think has been open for, I think, at least 10 years. And so this would be, they would do some demolition of on that site and construct, new construction with 16 total units. They do have site control in terms of a letter of support from Orange County, who's the current owner of the lot. And would consider entertain transferring that as the time would be right. Fauquier Habitat has 18 units in total, and they have site control of their lot. It's in Warrenton. Actually, a block behind Town Hall on Horner Street. They would propose some mixed use. They have a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club of Fauquier County. Owner occupancy, and again, adjacent to a public park. So that's the one owner-occupied project that was submitted. And then our large projects are both in the town of Culpeper. Culpeper Community Development Corporation and Chaz is proposing Parkside Apartments, which is sort of adjacent to Yow Meadow Park on the sort of the west side of town. 37 units in total. They do have site control. They own the property. They're proposing each unit having its own washer and dryer, and have some environmental considerations as part of their site development plan for bioswale and native plantings. There's some opportunity there as well for connecting through the parcel. I don't know that it's confirmed, but potential to connect a neighborhood through the apartment parcel to Yow Meadow Park for just better connectivity and better walkability for an adjacent neighborhood. And then People Incorporated has submitted for 60 units total, what they're calling Lightfoot Apartments. This is on property that currently is owned by Culpeper County and the town of Culpeper, a smaller parcel owned by the town. So they have, at the time of the application, they did not have site control documentation. My understanding is that that should be, in terms of a contingent ability for the county and town to transfer, is in place, and I think relates to a public hearing that will happen in March for the county's land that they own. They're proposing a community laundry facility. They've got universal design incorporated into 20 of their units. Again, this is the largest of the projects. What I would say about both of these, and sort of the reason that we're looking for some action today on this, is that both of these projects are seeking low-income housing tax credit credits through Virginia Housing, which has a deadline of March 11th, I believe. So being able to provide them with a contingent, award letter would go a long way towards helping them with those applications as part of their process. So again, what staff considered and what we're building up to here in terms of our recommendations was, again, geographic equity, wanting to, allow for, projects across the region. Proof of site control was a big thing in our, discussions internally, just because, again, with that timeline of June 30th, 2024, we feel like these projects need to get going pretty quickly. That also relates to the preparedness to move forward with their projects, most of which I think are prepared to move forward, but some again are very much have their site plans in place and are just doing their fundraising at this point or putting in their applications. We also tied in some of the guidance documents to statewide goals, the regional goals that came out of the regional housing study, and also a review of local comprehensive plans and sort of a compendium of strategies there, just to make sure that projects were meeting some of the goals that we have talked about here at the regional level and also locally. Most of the projects did provide some demonstration of support from either the local government as the landowner or the local government as zoning authority. If they didn't, we asked them to do so. Some have followed up with that, some have not yet gotten to that point. And then again, with the project funding request, as I shared in December, at least one project had asked for the full 1.8 million that we had available. Many of them had asked for 1 million or more. And when we went back and said, we've got to put a ceiling on it, and even at that, we're not sure that we can, make that request. Most were okay and understood the ceiling. I think, based on our recommendation, some may be disappointed if we're not able to provide that full amount, but in most cases, the percentage that we're providing or would potentially provide to them is small on the largest projects. So our recommendations, and again, this is what I'm bringing forth to you today, is to support 6 of the projects with initial awards. We would likely have contingencies on just about any of the initial award would be an award letter, but we would then go through a process for developing memorandum of agreement or contract. And those would likely have contingencies, again, based on the applicant's ability to access the other funding or the low-income housing tax credits. As I mentioned, demonstration of site control if they don't already have it, demonstration of that local support would also be something we'd want to see. And then there is the potential, again, because of those tax credits, but because of other contingencies, that some of this funding, even if it's awarded today, if there's a recommendation to award, could come back to the commission at a future time if the low-income tax credits aren't awarded or if other things happen that make a project not able to go forward. We would want to see that at staff. I'd prefer to see that sooner rather than later, so within the next 6 to 8 months have a sense of if a project is absolutely going to go forward or not. Because if it's not, then we would have returned to the commission with a discussion of, do we raise the awards to some of the other ones that we funded, or do we seek some of the projects that didn't get funded or didn't come through the first time? So our recommendations, and unfortunately this is small, but I'll walk through it here. For the large multifamily, for the 2 in Culpeper, staff's recommendation is $380,000 for each of those projects. What I've got here is percent of total project cost. Zoom in here. So for the Culpeper Community Development Corporation, it's 2.7%. For People Incorporated, it's just under 2.5%. There's a per unit number here. Again, both of those have site control or pending site control, and zoning is not an issue on either project. So we feel, again, if they get their low-income housing tax credits, that they are likely to move forward. That would be the main contingency on those 2 projects. In the mid-size range, Fauquier Habitat for Humanity and Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services, we would recommend $300,000 for each of those projects. Again, site control is pending for the RRCS, but it's a county-owned property, and the county has submitted a letter indicating their support and willingness to consider that transfer. Zoning in both cases is, as we understand it, is by right and fits within what would be proposed at present. And then on the small scale projects, I should say with Heroes Bridge is the one project that we're not recommending an award right now. And from my perspective, it is primarily related to no site control, and really there was not really a budget document given to us as to what the funds would go towards. The lack of site control, even though there is a path forward for that project, is one that, at least as of right now, is a fairly significant barrier with, again, as far as we know, no immediate outcome. I do make a note that we would certainly love to hold this project if funds become available in the future, and we would take the feedback that I've just provided to you back to Heroes Bridge and encourage them to continue to work through that. And if time came that funding did come back or funding became available, that we would love to see this project go forward, because it's one that we really think is very innovative. It just has a big question on the site control at this point. On the smaller size projects, Foothills Housing Corporation and Skyline Cap, we would recommend $200,000 for Foothills Housing Corporation and $240,000 to Skyline Cap for their projects. Again, both have site control. Skylines is pending this award. They have an agreement to purchase the property, which with this award would enable them to execute that agreement. The zoning for Skyline is in place. For Foothills Housing Corporation, my understanding is they need a special exception because it previously was a commercial use and now will be a residential use, but they have engaged at least initial conversations with Fauquier County on that one. The last thing I would say on this slide is really what I want to show is that for the largest projects, they have total costs in the $12 to $15 million range, and so with our funding, we're going to be a very small percentage of those projects. Even if we funded those at $500,000, that would bump it up to about 4% of their total project cost. I feel like for the size of those projects, they have other funding resources that will make or break them. I don't think that us bumping our amount up would necessarily change anything for them. You can see they're both pretty close on total project cost and on per unit cost between $6,000 and $10,000. As you get to the mid-sized projects, our recommendations, again, it's a little bit higher as a percentage and also a little bit higher as a per unit contribution. And then for the smallest projects, which frankly have the least resources to go forward, again, it's a higher percentage of total project cost and per unit on those. I think one of the things as staff that we saw was that it was good to see a wide range of number of units, and frankly, using Skyline as an example, I don't think we wouldn't anticipate to see a project with 60 units proposed for Madison, but a project with 5 or 6 units fits very well, especially one that has been used as transitional housing previously. So those are the recommendations we would put here. I know that I shared the information on the applications with the executive committee and then with all of you, just so you had the ability to see those. Myself and Jennifer can certainly answer any questions on this, but if there is discussion about, this breakdown of what we would recommend, or if there's other ideas in terms of how to distribute the funding or how to, kind of award the money, then we're certainly happy to hear that today. The last thing I would say is just our next steps is, again, the approvals requested today because of upcoming deadlines for those projects, for the 2 that have low-income housing tax credits, but also the 1 that has a pending sales agreement. If there was an approval, then we would work in March to get the award letters out and make notification to the press about the award. And then we would begin to work between now and frankly, the end of the fiscal year in June and July for developing those contracts and MOAs. But I appreciate the support that you've all given us throughout this process and allowing us to take this on. I think one thing I would say is when we had that presentation last June, I think we anticipated, okay, we'll have some time to develop this program, but what we found very quickly was because of the low-income housing tax credits especially, we needed to move pretty quick in terms of allowing the applicants the opportunity to put information in and provide these requests to us. So we're trying to be respectful of that as well by having a decision back to them before their deadline. So.
Patrick, the only thing I would add is that I know you invited board members to provide their input, and I know I provided it, and I know other people probably did as well. So I think to just say that it's the staff recommendation, I think is minimizing and I don't mean that in any way, one way or the other. It's just that it was a recommendation that has already gotten some input from board members. So it's not just staff, it's staff and board members.
And I appreciate Mayor Catlin saying that, because it was, again, shared with all of you. I've had, Mayor Catlin respond. I've had a couple conversations with some of you that have looked through these applications. We also had other members internally. Jennifer and I have been the staff that have sort of led this process, but we had some other staff members review and provide their feedback with their different perspectives that we've incorporated. We've also had a few people outside of the organization with Path Foundation at least put eyes on the applications to see if there's anything that we've missed, at least from our initial review of that.
So Patrick, the recommendations and the authority to approve the recommendations are contingent on the tax credit applications by the applicants, correct?
So if the recommendations, whatever, putting numbers away for now, whatever we would choose to, whatever would be directed to award to tax credit projects, the 2 that have those, anything that we would provide to them in terms of an award letter would basically say, paraphrasing here, Commission has awarded you this amount of funding contingent upon a successful low-income housing tax credit. Because again, with those projects, those tax credits are making up a great percentage of what if they're gonna be able to go forward or not. We can't, Virginia Housing is very flexible with us on this funding, but I don't think we want to put it towards a project that, may or may not go forward. I think we want to have some guarantee of that, and for those 2, they would need to have that guarantee.
Is there also a period of performance for all the other projects? Must they be complete by a certain period of time? What does the state require of us to confirm that we actually created affordable housing?
Right, so that June 30th, 2024 deadline is the end of our grant period with Virginia Housing. They have, again, said you've got an extra year if you've gotten through pre-development for projects, which all of these that are here would certainly meet that requirement.
They intend to meet that.
What's that?
They intend to meet that requirement?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, everybody here that's applied to us has, and I think when Jennifer, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but one of the questions was, can you meet the June 30th, 2024 deadline? And everybody has said yes.
So the agreements that will be prepared will, how does that get structured? When does the money get transferred? How does it get clawed back if they don't? Because what if the state comes clawing back their money?
Right. So the way it would be set up for us, and the way we've anticipated it, is to do these as reimbursable. So they would spend the money, submit to us, and we would submit to Virginia Housing. And if Virginia Housing says, no, this doesn't qualify, then we could take that back to them and say no. Most of them have especially the organizations that have been have done this sort of work before, which the 6 that we propose to award here have all done projects like this before. They have the ability and sort of know here's where we would target the money that they've requested from us. Some of that, as I said, over the next 3 months we would develop those formal contracts and MOAs. It's going to come up later with the contract for legal services, and that would be something that we would engage that firm to look at.
Anyone else? Comments? I will say, staff has done a terrific job with this. I mean, this is new territory, and I know that a lot of work was done to come up with this, and it's about as fair and equitable, I think, as it can be. That all the projects are certainly very worthy, and yeah, I know it was tough to eliminate one, but it makes you wish you had more than the $2 million to deal with, for sure. But, anyway, we do need to make a recommendation here, either to
Make a recommendation or a motion? You have a motion, don't you need a motion to?
I would prefer a motion either accepting the staff recommendation or.
Then I make a motion to accept the staff recommendation. Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Do we need a roll call vote on this, or is this?
I don't think we do, but if anyone prefers to do a roll call vote, we can certainly do that.
It's easier just to do it all at once. I just wasn't sure if we had to for this particular.
I don't think so.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the recommended funding here. So all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Sure. Exciting.
And I appreciate it, and again, what I would say for the one project that we did not recommend, we certainly will remain engaged with them, because I do think there's a very good opportunity for that project to continue to work through some of the things. And again, if some of the funding comes back, it may be something that comes back before you in several months. So
I want to also commend the staff for all the sounds like a lot of follow-up calls to make sure that you answer all the questions and the gray areas that there were on the application.
I would offer my thanks to Jennifer for that. She's the one that's, in some cases had to go back and tell people we may not give you the $500,000 that you requested or the $1.8 billion that you requested, and so she's borne the brunt of anyone that might not be super enthused about that. But thank you.
So you were the bad cop as well.
Yeah. There's an awful lot, and I hope it's going to be very successful. Okay. We just had for discussion here with lack of a quorum at the December meeting. There was a brief discussion regarding a charter amendment, and staff can provide details on what that process would entail. But I thought we could engage with members here who've had limited attendance at their other government meetings to discuss whether we need to make any changes. There are 3 members here with less than 25% attendance in the past 2 years. In addition to each of us committing to meeting attendance, would it be helpful for a commissioner or 2 to reach out to those members, or do we want to make any other sort of changes? Anybody have any thoughts? I think.
What does the charter say for a quorum? It's complicated.
For us, it's 50. Well, one more than 50%.
And that's it.
That's it.
Not a representative county, town, or any of that.
No, it does not have to. It's not specific to any specific church. I mean, so in this case, you could have all 5 counties with their 2 members and 1 town show up, and that would be a meeting.
Is that a state code requirement or just bylaw?
The 50% plus 1, I believe that's a bylaws requirement. The state code does have some language, but it's not related to quorums, and I actually feel like there's some other PDCs that have relaxed those numbers. So that would be, in terms of the charter amendment versus bylaws amendment, the bylaws amendment is obviously a much simpler process than the charter amendment.
I mean, I think it's been pretty rare that we've lacked a quorum, but you were the one that sort of introduced this conversation. But
Well, Patrick and I, we had talked about some have alternative member, you know, where the locality appoints someone like that. And we talked about that at the last meeting, but I told Patrick a few weeks ago that I didn't really care about having an alternative member from your county. I just wanted to do whatever it took to make sure we were able to meet. It bothered me that we wouldn't have a quorum. So whether it's reaching out to the people that don't attend, or whether that's changing our bylaws or whatever, I don't care. I just hate to see people come from all over the region and then us not have a meeting. That's all. That's my only concern. So whatever solves that, I'm for. And like I say, I'm going to push any particular one right now because I don't really care. But I do care about not meeting once people come to this meeting. So.
I'd like to suggest that we look at relaxing the percentage necessary for in-person necessary for a meeting. Because ultimately, I think the last time we had an issue, it was because I had said I was coming, but then because of issues with the county, I was only able to attend virtually. So if you had a lower number, but you know, for in person, then you could still probably end up having people there if you had the virtual option still available also. So.
Well, also, we vote on so many things unanimously that with that being the case, you know, it wouldn't matter if we had a third of the number here. But I don't think we ought to have less than 50% if we've got a contested issue. You know, if we have 13 people, well, 13 would be a quorum. If we had 11 people here, it was a 6-5 vote, I'd rather have a real quorum there. You know, so if we have some sort of issue that's a contested issue, I don't think we ought to be messing around with below 50%. But when we have a full slate that's unanimous, I don't think the quorum matters at all. So it just depends on what the issue is. Because when it's unanimous, we're just taking care of business. We're going check, 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 everything's good. Well, what's the big whoop about a quorum? But if it's some big issue, bylaws or something else, I'd like to have a good number of people here to really do something that's contentious. That's my only thought about it.
And my thoughts are, like I said before, just my opinion, is that we have the most important leaders in the region here that are influential. And if we lose that commitment to come, and that becomes prevalent more in the future, then this group becomes just another committee. And it's not, you lose the leadership role of having the most important leaders here in the region that meets once a month. And I don't want to just become another committee. And I know how important this group is. And to see it watered down, to me, is not the best way to go. Just my opinion.
I think we have to recognize the changing method of meeting that we have through advancements in telecommunications and electronics. Ultimately, I attend a number of meetings electronically. That allows me to be at the meeting, or any other person to be at the meeting after they have their input and everybody else do it. But the day that I have a hard time with the concept that physical presence is actually 100% necessary for an entity to conduct business. That's just sort of changing in the world now. And so I think we need to recognize that there will be times when people will not be able to attend physically, but could attend via WebEx or any other type of system, still have their say, still be able to register concerns or otherwise. I do agree that there may be benefit to having people together in a room, but I think we need to recognize that, and maybe the concept ought to be 50% virtual and here. So set up percentage for here and total percentage for all.
I would note too on the electronic or remote meetings is that, there's bills going through right now related to, that sort of electronic meeting, but as it stands now for, the commission or others that have adopted remote participation, members can only, it's 2 meetings or 25%, whatever the higher number is that they can attend per year. So there is some limitation even on that regard in terms of how many times an individual member could attend. So I think, there's various things that would come into play here, and I think, I'll take the notes that you all provide and sort of can come back with options for you if that's preferable. Certainly don't want to end discussion. I just wanted to make that note while it was on my mind.
Yeah, I guess we're probably not going to solve this today, but and I do appreciate both perspectives here as far as being here in virtual. I do think we need to recognize the change in how we do things, and there's going to be a lot more tendency towards virtual participation. However, we do meet just 6 times a year here, and the past year, the things that we've been doing as far as kind of picking a different location each time, I think it's been real beneficial. I know I've learned a ton about the other areas of the region, places that I wouldn't normally, see or go to. So that's been I think very beneficial for us. So I would encourage everyone to be here if you can.
If I may, I would just add, I do agree with Patrick, the way that it's written where you can only attend a certain amount kind of backs you into attending in person already. And to Mr. McCullough's point, if we at least dropped the percentage in the event this happened, my main concern is the planning district staff who's put all of this together and they show up and they can't conduct their business and it's on hold. So I do think we all need to hold ourselves accountable and be here, but we have the back end on the state code that says, 2 meetings, you can do this. But if we dropped the percentage in the event that happened, we wouldn't be tying the staff up with a hold on their work for an entire month because one of us ran into an issue. For me, one meeting, it was a fire, like a major fire, multiple townhomes, right? And I called you guys, I really wanted to come to lunch at the inn, so I was very disappointed. But there are things that inherently come up, and as administrators, we do meet in the off month as well, so we're getting that. So I do think a little flexibility would be most beneficial to the staff, and we can still hold ourselves accountable. And I think maybe even a certain number of absences, there needs to be like a discussion because you're always putting that burden of the quorum on the same people. So, I think that would help as well. So,
as of right now, the Code of Virginia requires a physical quorum to assemble, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
So if we drop that percentage
From what to what?
in the bylaw to 30%, I think we can, right?
No, a physical quorum must assemble before you can have a meeting.
But if the quorum was in the bylaws and as was adjusted down.
We define what the quorum is by the bylaws. The state code according to Patrick believes is that there is no state code specificity on what constitutes quorum. So
Never thought about it that way. That's very interesting.
So I just thought if we lowered it.
Interpretation.
From a lawyer.
From a lawyer.
So that's my point here. If we lowered it a little bit, then we would at least have some flexibility built in for worst case.
Yeah.
Was all.
So it's an appetite for the rest of us doing stuff you don't like when we show up.
Well, and how many times, Patrick, have we lacked a quorum over the last?
Yeah, so before December, the last one was April of 2017, I think. So it's
Rarely happens.
Maybe a problem that's not necessarily needing to be solved. I do like the concept of Mayor Pointer's concept that maybe there should be we should allow an alternate. That would definitely help with the concept of getting people here to represent the locality.
So to the alternate discussion, that is governed by state code, which provides that elected officials can name an alternate. So like the Board of Supervisors for each county or the town council could say, here's our appointee and here's the alternate for that commission. For the other appointed officials or the non-electeds, that option is not there. And it's, again, that charter amendment is, we can do it. It's a more drawn out process. But
and no one would have to name an alternate. It's just
it wouldn't be required,
if they want to.
if I might, what Ms. Schaefer brought up about those that have limited attendance, we don't really have, there's nothing in the bylaws or anywhere else that, sort of necessitates. I know some places will have, if you miss 3 meetings in a row, you get a letter from, the chair or the executive director. We don't really have that in place, and so I think, really what we have right now are three of our small towns that don't really participate. And so then the question, to me becomes, what's the ability? And in some cases, have had multiple conversations with other members of their councils as well. So I think that's something that, whether it is a letter or whether it's a direct outreach from commissioners or staff that work with those towns, I'd take advice on that regard as well.
I know for one of those towns that the mayor has a job that prevents that person from attending these meetings.
Right.
And so for that person, it may be necessary that they have an alternate, and that it becomes an acceptable means. And perhaps you can have something in the bylaws or something that says if they have a professional responsibility, fortunately, the salary that we receive as mayors of small towns is not quite enough to satisfy our lifestyle. So that we have to do something else. And if someone has a professional obstacle, then maybe that's an opportunity for allowing all.
Well, so we get to the point where you have planning directors here versus mayors and chairman of boards and county administrators. That's what we want, then I say go for it. That's just my opinion.
But Gary, how many Culpeper County chairs have been on this? I know most of the Culpeper County reps since my 15 or 20 years haven't been the chair. I don't know if you've got that list, but I don't think Culpeper County chairs have been the member on this board. I'm just saying.
We've always had a county administrator here and a board member.
Oh, no, a board member.
Yeah,
we all have four.
Fine. Yeah, I just don't want
I'm
to see
just
it watered
saying,
down
as far as
to
the chair,
planning
chair
directors or any other position within county or town staff. I mean, we're the regional leaders here. I mean, we can't commit to, what is it, once every 2-3 months to come to a regional meeting?
6 meetings.
I mean, like you said, if there's a problem and you can't come, that's understandable. But as far as losing that commitment to come to a regional meeting that encompasses the main leaders in the region, I think that's the wrong message to send to the group.
It sounds like there's apples and oranges here, and I respect fully what you're saying. Of administrative people, you want to have your top administrative people here, and where as much as you can, your mayors and your chairs. But there, as I said, there may be some instances of some elected officials. The head elected official cannot make it and might have to do an alternate.
So it seems likely we've missed quorum by very little margin most of the time, and so 11 out of 21 now gets you over 50%. 10 out of 21 is 47%. 9 out of 21 is 43%. So if we could decide today that we want the executive committee to draft up a new set of bylaws for consideration that maybe requires 9 out of 21, which is 86%, and bring it back for consideration, or some other percentage, or bylaws with a blank and then fill in the blank. 10 out of 21, 9 out of 21, 8 out of 21.
So that's one option, and sort of speaking to Bob and Gary's conversation, would an alternate who's also a board member be a compromise that might be worth considering?
I always assumed that would be the case when I discussed this. I always figured it's a board member.
Yes,
I think that's
I would agree with that. A board member,
So that,
council member.
so that, I mean, that's in state
That's what I
code.
always, I never visited anything else.
The state code is clear that the only alternate that could be named would be from the elected official side. So, if we went through a charter amendment to add that option, then the elected officials that were, appointed to the commission from each county council or county board of supervisors could also name an alternate member that could attend in their stead.
So would that be an amendment that we should also ask staff to bring to the executive committee for consideration.
Is it already being done in some locales? Do our bylaws preclude an alternate?
State code requires it to be in the charter. It's not in our charter right now, so.
Which is next to General Assembly cycle.
Well, for us, so the process to amend the commission's charter is draft the charter amendment, approve it at the commission, and then send it out to all of the localities, because the localities are the chartering members. And so then once we have 2/3, 9 out of 13 localities approve that charter amendment, then it becomes effective. So we did that in 2016. It's, it's a time consuming, but again, not an insurmountable process, especially if it's something that's been discussed and sort of recommended from the commission. It just takes a little bit more paperwork.
Just one other thing is that I missed that there are more of us brothers and sisters from the small towns here. And perhaps instead of a dunning letter of some sort, that they can get a letter that suggests that they can have an alternate who's an elected official who comes if they have a professional means for not coming. I don't know if you've already done that.
No, I haven't. I think it would be, rather than, probably it's phrasing here, but rather than saying alternate, it would basically just mean maybe they would have a discussion that, at their town council of appointing one of their members. There's no requirement that the mayor or the chair of the board of supervisors is appointed, but I think in that case, it would be something where they could have a discussion with their town council. I know, as you mentioned, Mayor Catlin, two of the members, and they're both mayors of small towns, have jobs that, typically preclude them from attending. So it's, to me, that's more of a question of, does the commission want me to go out and say to them, can you please appoint another member? Can I please come and talk to your council about, what it would take and the role and responsibility that 6 meetings a year require, or is it something else that, again, if any of you have relationships with those members, or if you know someone that's not here, if there's something you want me to do, then I'm happy to do it. I just need that direction.
I'd like you to reach out to them.
Yeah, we want them at the table.
I think anyone who's not doing what they know is required of them, and they've accepted that responsibility, just on principle, should be approached.
But they may not know that there's the opportunity for an alternate.
Well, they can just back off and name someone without us changing the bylaws. They shouldn't really be the representing person if they're not representing.
Yeah, so those towns, they've always traditionally been the mayor, and they've never appointed a different council person?
At times there's been others. It just so happens right now that it's, and I should say there's a third town where, to be, transparent, Mr. Ashby from the town of Remington has been on the commission since 2011, I believe, and has been a very good member, but I think since the beginning of COVID has been unable to meet, to come to in-person meetings and things like that. And so I think it's as much about, just the individual, council members versus mayor. Again, there's no requirement that it's one or the other.
Well, yeah, if we can reach out to the people currently serving that we'd like to see them back, and in areas that can appoint somebody else, encourage that. And then I guess you've written down some ideas for what we can do as far as changing quorum requirements and everything. If you can bring something back, I guess we can make a decision on that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can do that for the April meeting to have some draft ideas.
Okay, where are we now? Oh, number 11, new business. We have 2 items that were carried over from December. First is a grant application to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation for the Commission's Commuter Services Program. So Patrick, can you give us details on that?
I can, and if I might, we're 2:30 here, so just in the benefit of time, I think items 11A, B, and C are all grant approval requests, so I think we could probably handle them all with one single motion if you want me to go through all 3 of them. So
that would be great.
The first one is our application for the Commuter Assistance Program. As I talked about earlier, this is the program that DRPT has sort of directed us to not spend money over the past 2 years outside of staff time and kind of keeping up with commuters that directly reach out to us. We're starting to see them relax those rules. We submitted an application by February 1st, which is their deadline. It's a lower request than in past years. We requested $123,160 with a 20% match of $30,790, which is, again, sourced from the per capita dues from the member jurisdictions. This supports 1.5 full-time equivalent positions at the commission. And again, what we've done this year is to reduce our advertising numbers to be more, in line with what we anticipate spending given the last couple of years. There's a second request there also we've received notification from DRPT that each of these commuter assistance programs needs to have a strategic plan adopted by January 1st of 2024. So we did submit an application to their technical assistance grant program to support the beginning of that process. Requires a 50% match, but what we've been able to negotiate with them and with our VDOT funders is the federal portion of our VDOT rural transportation funding can be used as the match for this. So rather than having to provide a cash match for a consultant or something else, we're going to be able to use in-kind staff time to develop that plan. So that will be something that begins probably in later this calendar year as part of that. So both of those were submitted by February 1st. Item 11B was also submitted by February 1st, which is our 5310 program. This is for mobility management. This is the base funding that supports the FAMS program as well as the Regional Transportation Collaborative. What we've done this year, this really supports, right now, for the current fiscal year, it supports a half-time position at the commission, and we pass through funding to Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services to operate the FAMS One Call Center. We also have additional funding that goes out to support some of the volunteer driver programs that comes from the PATH money. What we asked for in this year's application was, because of the workload on our staff person, was to bump that position to a fully funded 40 hours a week through this 5310 program. And we would also support an additional full-time position at the FAMS call center, again, contracted to Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services. And then would also support through this program a couple of part-time positions at Aging Together. These are positions that are currently funded through the PATH funding, but we'd like to roll them into this 5310 funding through the state just because they're spending significant amounts of time on the same type of work here. It would also free up the PATH Foundation to either, we could use those funds for something else, or they could, reduce our award, which would be fine as well. 4% match on these ones. What the commission contributes is 4% on the mobility management towards our staff time. So it's the full match is made up through the other partners, Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services, as well as Aging Together would contribute towards their match amounts as part of that. And then item 11C is an application to the Department of Housing and Community Development for the FY 23-24 Homeless Solutions Program, the VHSP grant. This is one that's not due until April 4th, but we won't meet again before that deadline, so putting it out here for your consideration. This is the funding that supports our work as the lead agency for Foothills Housing Network and also supports our role as running the coordinated entry program. They've made a couple of changes in terms of amount that we can request for planning and administrative support, which will benefit us. We match this with the separate requests to each of you for regional housing and homelessness support that totals $48,600 every year. So between that local request and these funds, and then a little bit of our discretionary funds, we're able to staff one full-time, our COC coordinator, Rebecca, as well as the coordinated entry position and a half-time position to support coordinated entry as well. So this is a community application, so what we're seeking your approval of is just the regional commission's request, but this will go in along with other partners such as Culpeper Housing and Shelter Services, People Incorporated, Community Touch, who are the service providers working on that project. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of those three grants, but these are annual grants that have been in place for many years.
Any questions on these? Okay, I guess we are looking for a motion to approve all three of these at one time and instead of go one by one.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next is item 12D, the annual community development block grant priorities. Staff is recommending the priorities remain the same as in 2021, but can answer any questions or if you have any concerns. Anything? Okay. Okay.
I would ask for a motion on that one also.
Yeah. Got a motion and a second? All in favor? Okay, next up is the Flood Preparedness Fund. Provides opportunity to leverage the hazard mitigation plan update to support resiliency planning. And Patrick and Michelle have got details.
There's just a one-page summary. This is something that was brought to our attention. This is funding that Department of Conservation and Recreation has, specifically tied to flood preparedness. What you have in front of you, and I apologize for not having this as part of the packet, but we were working through with DCR and some other partners about what this might look like. Really, what we're proposing as staff is, because of our hazard mitigation plan update, which is going to kick off probably in late part of this year or early 2023, one method of applying to this community flood preparedness fund would be to seek additional funding for our hazard mitigation program, which would result in a resiliency chapter, specifically focused on infrastructure and climate resiliency as part of the hazard mitigation plan. It would also, and this is sort of the selling point for localities with the hazard mitigation plan, would, as part of the strategy development through the hazard mitigation plan, would specifically find projects that would fit into that resiliency framework for each of your localities if you're a participating locality, which everyone here is. The only two that aren't are the Plains and I believe Madison, maybe, town of Madison. So in general, what I would say is this is just us actually seeking additional funds. We intend to procure a consultant to do the hazard mitigation plan update this time around, and with this additional funding, we would also task them with developing this chapter focused on regional resiliency, as well as the local strategy development tied into that. So I'm happy to answer questions. Michelle's also here. She could probably answer questions better than I could on this, but it's really additional opportunity to bring in some local strategies to the hazard mitigation plan that have not been in there in the past.
Any questions? You need a motion on this as well.
Okay, that'd be great.
Anyone like to make a motion on this item?
Unless you haven't been flooded by request, then
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? I know you're just reading some of it. But if not, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. Back in October, the commission requested a compensation survey report. Staff presented the information to the executive committee earlier this month, and the committee recommends approval of the report and the pay plan. So Patrick, if you could review that.
I'll be brief since I did review with the executive committee, and as Chair Taylor said, they did bring forth a recommendation on this. Just for your information, the request was actually made in October of 2020. We pulled some information last year. It was prepared for December, but we held off with the lack of a quorum. Two primary sources, and the request for the review was really just to see where does the commission stand in terms of its salaries, and in comparison to two primary sources is what I used, which was Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions has a biennial salary survey, so that's all the other regional commissions in the state. So compared our positions with those as best we can. There's a lot of variation between PDCs, but generally there's some commonalities there. And then pulled some local government pay scale information. Many of you either do an annual or a biannual process. I'm was able to access some of those details, and also pulled pay scales from several of the jurisdictions, including Fauquier, Madison, Orange County, Town of Culpeper, and Town of Warrenton, which gave a pretty broad overview of salary scales in the region. It was my job to sort of tie where our positions fit compared to positions locally. So in the back of what you have in your packet, there is a sort of a description of the positions that we compared to, or that I compared to. And that's really where the recommendations come from. What I would say is that the main outcome for this is a kind of generalized pay plan that the executive committee reviewed and agreed with. This is something that we don't really have in place right now. We don't have, there's not really ability to step from one grade to another. There's not really internally two positions. There's not really a number in place for them. So these numbers are again my work in pulling from the comparison areas from the PDCs as well as the local governments, and are put there as this is where we would sort of begin each position in terms of where it would grade. There's also 4 positions there that are listed that are not currently in place at the commission. That's a deputy director position, a finance director position, program manager, which is sort of similar to a regional planner too, as I envision it. But just because we do a lot of things that are not planning, we do a lot of program management now more than in the past. And then there's also a regional planner 1 position that's just vacant at the current time, not being advertised for, but it's just not anyone filling it at this point. So that's the main, I think that was the main discussion at the executive committee was, adopting this pay plan. I think from my perspective, it would then become a question of if that is indeed approved, then when to implement that as part of the FY 2023 budget or at some other time would be something I would request from the commission in terms of direction. Again, I'm happy to answer questions on this. My feeling is that this not only is meant to, make sure that we're competitive with current staff and current, when we advertise positions, but is also something that can be used as a retention tool. I don't have any, we're not going to compete with, our highest paying local governments or, some of our certainly not private sector partners, but at least something that gives some flexibility to the director in terms of, scales and ranges for positions. If and when that needs to change is helpful, and that's the main thing that I'm proposing here.
Anyone have any questions, any thoughts? Well, we need a motion then to consider approval of the compensation survey report, the pay plan, and to provide guidance on timing of its implementation.
This is a proposed scale that you're talking about. That's not implemented so far.
We don't have any scale at all. So yes, this would be the
So
first
part
one.
of what you're asking for is a motion to do all those things plus accept this proposal, and I will make such a motion.
How far are we out of whack?
In general, we're pretty good on most positions. There's a couple of positions that I think will require some adjustment. Probably if it was a year-to-year type thing in the total for the entire agency, I would say 15 to 20,000 across, not per position, but total. So I think we're pretty close. We just don't have anything formalized that allows for any sort of adjustment or anything else.
So we had a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion about it? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
We wanted guidance as to the timing. We'd want to make that a separate motion since there was no guidance given.
I don't know if I need a motion, but I would appreciate any sort of direction as to if you want it as part of the upcoming budget. or
Well, I think
May or April, or wait until the beginning of the new year?
Patrick needs to make the budget work. He needs to present a budget that balances out with the revenues we have. So I would say if you can do that with what we have coming in and what's going out and align it with this plan, then show us that can be done.
Can we do it this year?
I think with that 49,000 extra right now could be done.
Right.
That unallocated reserve. I mean, then it would just be part of the budget.
Plus, it's only going to have a relatively small effect on this year, because we only have a couple of months. It wouldn't be the full amount.
Or I would recommend it be brought in with the new fiscal year.
Anybody got any problems with any of this?
Yeah.
No motion.
Do we need a motion for I mean,
I mean, I
I've
think
heard both,
consensus would
so-
be fine, but
or, how about a consensus then? Gary, you're suggesting starts with the new fiscal year.
Right, and Patrick's pretty good at putting together a budget. He'll show us how it can all work out.
Is everyone good with that? That would be the easiest thing. Okay. All right then. All right, we get on to number 12, report from the nominating committee.
The executive committee serves as a nominating committee, and they brought forth the following slate for next year. The chair would be Megan Taylor, vice chair would be Paul McCullough. I would remain as treasurer. At large would be Mayor Caitlin, and at large past chair would be Mayor Coyne. Further, the committee nominated Tim Crozier from Orange County and Jonathan Leakley from Madison County to serve 3-year terms beginning July the 1st on the Go Virginia Region 9 Council. Recommendation.
With that recommendation, we need to also ask if there's any nominations from the floor.
I move the nominations be closed.
Okay. All right, then I guess we need a motion to approve the slate of officers and committee members as stated.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
A motion and a second. Do we need voice vote on that?
Voice vote's fine, I don't think we need roll call. So.
No vote, okay. All right, all those in favor of the new slate of officers, the new old slate of officers, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. Now, this is an unusual event. We need to accept a motion to enter into closed session.
We'll make that motion. I move that the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission convene in closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3711A29, for the discussion of the award of a public contract for legal services.
Need a second.
Is there a second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we are now in,
I think we need a roll call vote to go into closed session.
just to come out.
I
Not to
think
go
to
in, right?
I think to certify.
Yeah.
Yeah, to certify it
just
at the
to come
end.
out.
We can do roll call
You don't
vote.
need a motion to come out. Actually, the chair of the meeting can just come out. But there's traditions that go way back on every council across Virginia. But there's a difference of opinion on that.
Well, I can take a roll call vote if you prefer.
Would you
The chair's discretion.
I prefer to be a roll call vote because we're going into closed session.
Okay.
We're going out of public discussion.
Okay.
And I think when you make that move, it should be a roll call vote,
Okay.
regardless of the regulation.
All right.
Which I think they should.
Well, let's do a roll call vote then.
Mayor Catlin? Mayor Coyner?
Aye.
Mr. Curry? Mr. Deal?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue? Mr. Eggertson?
Aye.
Mr. Hively? Mr. Jackson? Mr. McCullough? Mayor Roby?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Aye.
Mr. Voorhees? Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Ayes have it, there were 7 absent.
All right. You go right ahead, you got it in front of you.
Do each of you certify that, to the best of your knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission in the closed meeting? Mayor Catlin?
Yes.
Mayor Coyner?
Aye.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Mr. Deal?
Yes.
Ms. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Eggertson?
Yes.
Mr. Hively?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mayor Roby?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Voorhees?
Yes.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
We have a motion.
Move to accept the director's recommendation to hire
Litton and Cypher.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, terrific. All right. I guess we can quickly zoom around the room and do the round table. Why don't we start with Mayor Catlin?
I want to announce that you have seen the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not an ongoing train. The post office and the town of Washington has finally opened after a 2 or 3 year deal.
Wow.
I do want to personally, or as a town, thank the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission for allowing us to use that entity as a flow through for the funds we needed to beautify the post office, make it look more than a double wide. So we are grateful. Thank you.
In Orange County, Jim Crozier sends his regrets. He had conflicts with some tests he needed to get taken care of. But we're excited. We did open our public safety building. We've been talking about it a long time, and it's actually open. People are in it and working, and that includes our 911 center, which is open and functioning. We want to thank Madison County for taking our calls in their center while we did some of the transition. We're all back in there and open. We've had our first public meetings in there. There's boardrooms in that building as well. So if you have occasion to come to an Orange County
April commission meeting will be at the public safety
board
building.
meeting, it'll be in the room that we're going to have the April commission meeting in. You'll get to see it. It's very nice. And don't come to the Gordon building for a board meeting anymore because no one will be there. Though my office is still in there, we're going to try to do a little renovation just to rearrange people, but the public doesn't need to go there for board meetings. And then our radio system is up and live. That was an ordeal, but it's up and working, and the coverage is far better, 95+% countywide versus our 17%, and we're working with our neighbors to make sure we're interconnected. That's kind of the next phase, and making a huge difference in our ability to communicate with our public safety, first responders, and our school buses. We haven't lost any children in a while, which we seem to do all the time last year at the beginning of the school year. So those are huge steps forward for our community. And then our new initiative is our board is really wanting to try to follow some of y'all's lead and expand our parks and recreation offerings. So we've kicked off some planning work for that, and we're looking at facilities east, central, west, across the county, and we're excited about that. So those are the kind of the big things going on in Orange.
All right, in the town, let's see, we have, since the last meeting, we have 4 new council members, one returning ex-mayor of the council member, working on the budget. See some of the projects we're working on. We have a new pedestrian bridge in Meadow Park that's going to replace one that flooded on a regular basis. And due to the success of our splash pad, we put a fence around that to try to control the wandering children and keep them out of the parking lot and getting lost and things of that nature. And just a bunch of other projects we're working on, from utility projects to other projects. I think we're the same. We've got a slew of projects that we're actually not staffed up to handle them all at one time, but we're doing our big ones right now. We have 100 homes coming in at Round Hill Meadows. The first 2 model homes are being constructed now. And the biggest project that we got is our standpipe replacement. It's 110 years old. We do need to do something. And hopefully we'll get that done next year. It has been a chore from estimates that I wouldn't take a $10 bet on any one of them I've been given. Anywhere close.
Will it be a tank there, Greg, or another standpipe, or a tank, or what will be up there?
Well, we've gone back and forth about 3 times right now and can't get a straight answer on the price. Really can't. Our goal, our preference would be the bulk, the 300,000 gallons, same as the standpipe.
With the star on top?
Oh, yes. That star's not going away. I wouldn't be there. It would go. If it goes out, I hear it. One ball.
You'll have to talk to Mr. Hively about your water.
We had, on February 14th, we had the groundbreaking for the Orange County African American Historical Society's parklet. They're working with partnerships with the town. It's a piece of property over on Church and Chapman Street. And in that area, it used to be a pretty vibrant African American community there economically and just within that area residentially. So we have been working with them to get this parklet done so that there are interpretive panels put into the park, and the interpretive panels will have a QR code so that people can see more information dealing with each panel. And they are hopefully, they have set a date, the African American Historical Society have set a date of June 19th for the finished date. So hopefully we can get that done. The town is working with some engineering things, helping them with that, and we're hoping they can get that done by then. The other thing that we're planning on right now is June 11th is the sesquicentennial celebration of the town of Orange. So our committee is working on that, and that's moving forward in a good manner. So we're real happy to see that that's going to be coming about, and I think it'll be a nice day in the town, definitely.
Subject to council approval, I'll be replacing Heather Sutton for next meeting, so at the moment, I don't have anything to say.
Yes, welcome, Bill. So I think that's going to happen. And Paul, was it you that messed up the quorum? It was actually Heather. She got stuck in a meeting too. So
it was a snowball of a lot.
It was like, yeah. So I didn't want you to think it was just you.
Yeah.
So in Warrenton, right now we have, we're in the middle of our water and sewer rate study. So those initial numbers are coming back, and we're looking at ways to use ARPA funding to offset some of those increases. We also put an RFP on the street for a pay study. Council tries to do one about every 5 years. We're 8 years past the last one, so we need to take a look at that, especially in today's market. We're also looking at acquisition of some land in town for a park, and so we'll be going into our second closed session on that this month. We're also currently studying relocation of our public works facility in conjunction with the county and potential collaboration. And then one of our larger efforts right now is a major grant application on septic remediation. We are struggling a little bit on that one to meet some of the requirements on the income levels of the homes that will be served by this grant. So we're continuing to work through that. I reported to you guys recently that we passed a mixed-use ordinance related to our existing shopping centers to allow for infill residential and additional opportunities on those very expansive shopping centers. We are seeing our first couple of applications preliminarily coming in and getting a look at those. So that's been exciting to see the opportunity with those locations. Council will be taking up this month consideration of making the downtown closure on Friday and Saturday nights permanent that we did during the pandemic, and that would just become a permanent arrangement that would roll through the weekend. So they'll be considering that at their upcoming meeting. And we will have our official pre-application meeting with Amazon next week, and then they'll be submitting for their 42-acre data center site within the next month.
We will break ground May the 1st on, they'll tear up the entire runway at our airport, and they will regrade it. I mean, when it was done back in the 50s, the airport goes back to the 30s, but it was not paved. And when it was paved in the 50s, they basically put asphalt along the roadway, as it laid. And so it will be totally removed and regraded and rebased and totally new runway and all new taxiways. And so hopefully that'll set us for a long time into the future. It's, we got pretty good grant money for it, which of course what we always need in Gordonsville. We're also in the process of applying for a, well, it'll end up being several $1 million grant for park. And of course I shouldn't even mention a grant because I doubt if anybody else does. Who knows how that's going to go. But it is a 50-50 match, And the amazing thing is we've already got the match that we're applying for. So we've lined up over $1 million in match for our grant, 50/50. And what we're looking to do is, I don't know if you're familiar at all with Gordonsville, but we have a park and a pool. And that would be totally renovated, and it'd be an all-new pool, 25 meters rather than like 20 yards. So it'd be a full, nice competition pool and a renovated park. And then we've got a connecting park winding over to the fairground. So through the entire center of Gordonsville, we have a park. It'll be park around through the entire downtown. And we've acquired 4 properties and torn down 2 houses to do this. So it'll be extensive. We're really trying to set up our park system for 100 years. Between the airport and the park, we think we're setting us up for a long time.
So Mayor,
And,
what's
you know,
I'm sorry, what's the approximate operating cost for your pool?
Well, the red ink runs from the 20s to the 30,000. So the costs themselves vary, but it is red ink on the over the emissions and everything. So we eat that every year. And for and the main reason we're committed to it is because everywhere in Central Virginia, it's clubs. You join a club to swim. So all the underserved kids can't swim. And we're committed to that red ink and to whatever it takes to have a public pool. You can go to Charlottesville, it's crowded, it's expensive, same in Fredericksburg. We're small, we get people from Culpeper County, they come to Gordonsville, lots from Madison, lots from Greene, lots from Albemarle, and lots from Louisa. So we usually run a little under 50% of attendance of Gordonsville citizens, but we fund the whole thing.
So
This is our gift to Central Virginia.
do you have any contributions coming in from the private sector any during the year to make up the difference?
No, not for annual. We may have to in the future because as we expand this, we may need 1 or 2 more lifeguards, we may need more park personnel. So we may need to do all sorts of different things because if that red ink goes up to 50 or 60, we can't eat that even with our intentions. And we would have already made that commitment, accepting the millions in grants for the capital. So we will do whatever it takes, but it may need to take an annual fundraising. But we're committed to having a public pool, rather so all swimming pools will not be a club. I worked at the Country Town Pool in Orange growing up. I taught 4 years swimming lessons. I've seen the difference in children's lives, and it's probably people that are alive today and didn't drown because of those lessons. And I'm just committed to it. And when I'm not on council anymore, in about 30 or 40 more years, I'll still be around to make sure the son of the guns that follow me don't slack on that because it's important. It's a commitment we have. Really not, like I say, we usually average a little under 50%. So our commitment is not to citizens of Gordonsville, it's to Central Virginia. And so it's important to us. No, it's not a moneymaker, but
And it's not covered or anything, it's just an outdoor pool?
outdoor pool. I will say that one thing that helps us in that area, it's not on a pure taxpayer basis. 2 or 3 years ago, the owner of a large commercial building, 27,000 square feet, adjacent to our airport, took suddenly terminally ill. And well, before that, he had Alzheimer's, and they had tremendous monthly bills taking care of him. So they had kind of a fire sale for this building, and we grabbed it. At the time, we were looking to build $1 million to $1.5 million public works, new public work. We had the land, we already bought the land for it. And so we said, rather than spend $1.5 million for this 7,500, 8,000 square feet and build a public works, we'll buy this. Use more than 7,500 square feet. Ours is a little bigger. It's about 9,000 to 10,000 square feet, public works, but it's a 27,000 square foot building. So it is now fully rented to 6 other entities. And between that and the other 2 properties we have to acquire, we got that building for $300,000, 27,000 square feet. The 7,500 was going to be $1.5 million. And we're getting over $100,000 in income a year from this building, rent. We'll use some of that $100,000 in rent for our entrepreneurship rather than taxpayer money for the pool.
All right. I will just say for Culpeper Town, tomorrow evening, our Town Council and Planning Commission are going to meet, and we're going to get some information about the zoning overhaul that we're in the process of undertaking with some consultants. And as spring is coming along soon, and as we're getting out of the pandemic, the events are starting to come back to life. So we have a couple of events. We've got our Carnival this weekend, the Mardi Gras themed stuff around the town of Culpeper that you'll probably see me wandering around with a mask, freezing to death. It's not going to be like this, unfortunately. We're bringing back our spring festival, we're calling it the Gnarly Culpeper Block Party this year. It's not going to be the typical beer fest that it was with tastings. We've changed it a little bit, but music, food, and not to be outdone, out in the county, there's going to be Culpeper Palooza on April the 23rd, a 12-hour all local music, local food, local beer fest. So that's going to be fun. I'm just giddy to get back out and do something.
What's that date again? When is that?
The 23rd is Culpeper Palooza, 23rd of April. And then the week later is the Gnarly Fest. So two good things.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Madison, we're in the middle of budget season, which is too much fun. And then on top of that, we've got our exit with Greene County and RSA, which is going kind of. We're doing a bunch of internal work on some planning ordinances, just updating, kind of adapting to the times. We're approving Airbnbs like hand over fist. Every month it's several more that are adding into the county's TOT fund. And then we're selling a bunch of excess properties, which we haven't ever had real good proposals. We finally got some good ones, so we're going through that process.
Does that include Quigley Snow?
We have a proposal. School in a floodplain. That's a good deal.
Swimming lessons.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've tried that. It's frowned upon.
Mr. Eggerton, what you got?
Like Mr. Jackson said, it's all about the budget for me right now at least, but we're coming along good on that. Our Culpeper Sports Complex field house is walls up out of the ground now. It's really taking shape, and can't wait to see that open in hopefully a September time frame. And we're entertaining some pretty significant zoning applications right now, one of which is housing related and one of which is data center related with Ms. Shaver.
Which is just getting started. So we'll see how that goes. And there's a lot of good things happening in Culpeper, the town right now, and the county. And I appreciate Chris's leadership. And anytime I communicate with Chris, he's back to me in a heartbeat. And I really appreciate that, Chris. A lot of good things happening. Like I said, I guess the latest is Culpeper's being considered, and I think it's going to happen, to turn our battlefields into a state park. And Governor Youngkin amended his budget and included $4.9 million in order to generate the transition, which is, we're excited about that. I've actually been working with Charles Jameson and Hortense up here at the museum, trying to get them on the ground floor to commingle some Black history in, make sure some Black history is commingled into the state parks with that initiative. I think that's important. And so they're on top of that, and that whole project should be coming along in the next several months, and we should get to the point to where that's going to be in fruition in the next 6 months to 8 months, I'm hoping, and looking forward to that. So a lot of other things happening too, and as we trek on, and like John said, the rec center is close. I think the gymnasium part is basically built. The other half that includes the administrative offices and the community room, et cetera, is still being worked on, but excited about that. Excited about our complex, the fields, we're putting 14 lights, lighting 14 fields at the complex. And somebody told me the other day that it's going to be one of the nicest, best complexes in the state after we get the lighting on the fields. So, yes, sports tourism is beginning quite a bit. We've already been involved with that for a year or two, but we just ratified an agreement to get the Little League state championships here in 2023. So, and working with UVA and others on some other rugby, lacrosse, soccer, etc. So everything's going well in Culpeper, and a lot of good things happening.
Try to be real quick. Thank you, Patrick, and your team for helping us with redistricting and figure out what we're supposed to do and when. And with any luck, our package is at the AG, so he can ignore it for 60 days so we can move on.
I mean, I appreciate Orange County and Culpeper, because that was one that, as I went around and worked with some of you, that local redistricting guide that was released in March of 2020 basically had a line that said, oh, pay attention to anything in the General Assembly this year, and that was one that occurred and then adds this whole process to it. So,
like a lot of people, we're working through broadband, body grant stuff. So those of you who will be working with All Points Broadband, Culpeper, and Fauquier, we really want to compare notes on agreements to make sure we have service into the future, not just getting fiber deployed, but maybe be able to use it for a long time.
It sounds like you should talk to Orange after today's paper.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how much they paid Culpeper Star Exponent to print that article in the paper, but
that's a big deal.
That was a good article.
I didn't read it.
Yeah, it was all about them and getting out early in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And we're jumping into subdivision and zoning ordinance review and trying to get EMS established. Feet wet in a lot of different areas, but as was noted, it's Berry Fest.
Yeah, that's coming up.
April 30th, so we'll be floating non-biodegradable ducks down the mighty Thornton River, maybe catching them all on the other end. Please come out.
Again, I'm going to thank Patrick for his help. Last meeting, I let everybody know that we were trying to go to battle with CenturyLink and on the lack of service that a lot of our citizens have with the landlines. And after that conversation, actually 6 counties crossing planning districts. It was Albemarle, Grayson, Nelson, Warren, Rappahannock, and Buckingham met at the VACO conference and got together and talked about similarities in citizens not having good service or reliable service and issues. And 5 out of the 6 of us spoke today during the SCC hearing between CenturyLink trying to go over to Connect Holding. And I don't know how often that happens, but it felt pretty good to have all 6 counties speaking back to back to back to back to tell everybody listening what was going on. So thank you very much, Patrick, because he helped coordinate that meeting in Richmond and Zoom calls and all that good stuff. Let's see. Clevengers, I'd love to talk to you, Gary, at some point about Clevengers, just because I can't do anything about it. Mr. Curry tells me, but I'd love to know what's going on in the border with Famous, not exactly with Rappahannock, darn close.
Can't talk without Brad Rosenberger here, that's for sure.
And then, in case you haven't read, Old Rag is going to require a pre-purchase ticket to hike this year. So if you know friends, family, citizens that normally do that, please make sure they buy the ticket before they come out, because they'll be very unhappy if they get there.
Clay's issue is going to turn into our issue, but they get turned away from Old Rag.
Well, so that's just to limit numbers at any one time?
Yeah.
$1. to purchase your ticket.
But it's really just
Put a
about
limit on tickets.
managing the load.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
Is it as much about like the parking as it
It's
is
just
like,
the
just
routes
everything?
overused, and there's 2-hour waits to get through some
Right.
of the rock scrambles, and it's just a disaster up there.
Early on in COVID, they were counting like 5,000 to 6,000 people up there a day.
Yeah.
Where it's normally that in half a year. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think this limit's, what, 800 or something a day? You can't have any more than that. That still, it seems like a ton of people.
We're working again also, as Gary said, with that and the batting grant. My budget is submitted to the board this Friday. This was a reassessment, a general reassessment year. We do that once every 4 years. Average home price went up to $460,000. I'm going to be reducing the budget by, or the tax rate by 5 cents, but people under my proposed budget will actually see about a $550 increase in tax. Which is driven primarily by the need to fund on a 24/7 basis, a new fire station, which is about $1.3 million in the budget. Of course, we've taken into account a $2.5 million hit on the grocery tax if that actually goes through. And also a $750,000 hit from the IRS on their actuarial recalculation of people in high-risk jobs. They used to calculate those people as dying earlier on in life, so the amount we paid was smaller, but they've now decided that they live just about as long as everybody else does, so they sent us a bill for $750K. I don't expect my budget to go through the board unscathed. I expect that to go down some. But it's going to be a very tight and painful budget year for them. But on the plus side, we've been informed that we're going to be awarded a Governor's Environmental Excellence Award on our Rappahannock access projects. That's not just Fauquier County, that's the partnership with the Rappahannock River Access Committee and other entities. And so we're very pleased about that, and about our Civil War trail on the Rappahannock is about to go live also, where you'll be able to use your phone or your tablet to receive updates as you go down the river as to battlefields and other forts and things of note along the way. So, all good stuff there.
That's good. All right, terrific. Well, again, thank you, gentlemen, for arranging our meeting space here today. It was wonderful. I guess when next we meet, we will be in Orange. So, does anyone have anything else?
So we're getting a full tour in Orange?